It's your boy Zay-P, Zay-P the I am. I am that I am, as you are that you are, for we are all that we are. From the individual to the many, from the many comes the all, and the all is one. So your boy's back at it. I'm back with a brand new video. We're going to talk about what it means to be yourself. Now, I'm going to talk about this from a couple of different levels. I'm going to talk about this from the place of authenticity. When we talk about authenticity, particularly with regards to spirituality, particularly with regards to connecting, to figuring out your own truth, to accessing your own gifts and abilities, the idea of really being that authentic self, of really discovering, of really defining, hone-tuning the authentic self and your own truth is a very powerful and necessary step in our spiritual walk through life. At the same time, I'm also going to approach it. I need to talk to the young men out there, because me as a mentor and with working with the youth, particularly young men, and helping them as they kind of come into their own fruition as men and understanding what it is to be a man, to be masculine, and to still be present in this modern world. When it comes to that, we need to discuss this idea of what it means when we hear be yourself. So I'm going to take it back to the early days. A lot of times, specifically with men, when we hear be yourself, we're hearing that from our mothers, we're hearing that from loved ones, we may hear that in society in general. And this also applies to women, where we're always hearing this lip service of being yourself. But a lot of the culture doesn't really reinforce being yourself. If you choose to be different, if you choose to think in your own way, if you choose to walk your own path, a lot of times what will happen is that you come into these experiences where you're shunned, where you're kind of made the outcast, or you're ridiculed, or somebody's cracking jokes, or you're looked at as weird, strange. You get all these judgments and bullshit. And so as we go through life, we get a lot of experiences that invalidate our own sense of self, that invalidate our own desire to be true to ourselves, to even be ourselves. And we get all of these messages from the culture that tell you, no, don't be yourself. You need to be what society wants you to be, right? So typically with men, that is, you need to be strong. You need to be a provider. You need to be this, that, and the third. All these traditional bullshit ideas. Nobody's got time for that. So let's get down to the real. What does it mean when you hear be yourself? Now, I remember hearing this as a young man, listening to even my mom telling me, just be yourself, and not really understanding what that meant. I'm like, I am myself. I'm me. What do you mean, be yourself? Being yourself takes a lot of courage. Being yourself takes some willingness to be different. It takes a lack of attachment to other people's judgments. You got to be willing to be shunned, or be ridiculed, or be outcast, and be so solid and validated in yourself and in your own experience and what you're trying to create, that it don't matter about the judgments of others. It's very hard to do and very hard to come to as a young person. And it becomes easier as you get older. But when we look at it from the context of a young person's mind, here's how you can start to get a little closer to your truth. Here's how you can start to get a little closer to what it means to be yourself, and how that plays a role with whether you're trying to attract somebody, a partner, or whether you're trying to attract certain things in life that really resonate with you. Here's how we start with being yourself. It takes a level of confidence as well. And the reason why I say this is because to be yourself, you got to be willing to speak your truth. You got to be willing to share what's on your mind, share how you are when you're alone. So I'll use a lighthearted example to demonstrate this. You look at young men today, video games are a huge part of the culture. Now, typically, on average, and it's changing as the generations scale upwards, mostly video games appeal to men, appeal to young boys that grow into men, and more women are coming into the video game culture. But typically, and even up to this day, you'll find it's men and it's guys who are totally into video games. or comic books or any of these kind of geek culture type of stuff. Now, like I said, more and more women are coming into this stuff, so this is not to knock you ladies. But with that, say you're a big comic book collector, say you're a big video game player. When you meet somebody, you might have the urge to downplay that, to not admit that, to not show that, because maybe that's thought of as being too geeky. Maybe that's thought of as being whatever the case may be. Even nowadays, right now, it may not even be thought of as being too geeky, but there's still a lot of judgments, because I know a lot of women, a lot of young ladies will look at video game players and comic book guys as like people who are just into their own corny, geeky stuff and are not very serious about life, right? And so what happens is that as we meet somebody, we tend to want to put on a mask. We tend to want to present maybe what we think is the best versions of ourselves. We tend to want to bring out our representative. And the representative is that which we think is our best version, or that which we think will be most accepted by the others we're interacting with, right? This is how we come into wearing masks in our life, right? Because you go into the professional world, you put on the professional mask, you start speaking properly, you start holding yourself in rigid postures and walking, doing all these things to fit in. Same thing happens when, you meet a lady, maybe you want to be kind of cool, so you start to add on a little extra swag. So if that's the case, you're not really being yourself, because you're putting on airs, you're putting on a mask, right? And so an example of being yourself would be if you met somebody, you didn't give a fuck if they were into video games or comics, but you admitted that as your truth, because that's just your truth. I love video games. I read comic books. That's how I escape. That's how I relax. That's how I come back to some peace in my life. Nothing wrong with that. Now, if you feel the need to hide something like that about yourself because you're interacting with somebody, obviously you're not being yourself. And what happens is, as you start to do that more and more and more, you whittle away more and more away from your truth. And then you don't allow the person you're interacting with a chance to even get to know the real you. And so being yourself is being willing to share all of that, to say what it is, right? At the same time, an important facet then becomes the balance. So you always want to be able to be yourself. But in this life, there's co-creative experiences, right? So you want to bring in balance. So again, back to the example. Maybe you're a comic book geek. Maybe you're into video games. The girl you're into is not into that stuff. She likes to go out. She likes the nightlife. She likes to hang or whatever. So you want to put on a mask and go and be what you think she wants, instead of just letting her see you as you are, right? So if you make the choice to let her see you as you are, share the fact that you're into video games, share the fact that you're into comic books. Maybe share those things with her at times to an extent, but then you got to counterbalance that with the fact that you are dealing and creating a co-creation experience with somebody else. So this is to check your own freaking ego, right? This is not to be so freaking self-absorbed and consumed with the fact that you're into video games and you're into comics. And so now every time you spend some time with this person, all you want to do is talk about your video games. All you want to do is talk about comics. You never want to take time and recognize what that person's into. You never want to make the effort to kind of engage and help them embrace those aspects of life. So maybe she is into nightlife and all that stuff, right? The best option at this point would be for you to own who you are, exactly what you want to do. I like video games. I like comic books. At the same time, I want to share that with you. At the same time, you got to be willing to put those things down sometimes and come across the line and say, yeah, let's go out to dinner. Let's go to a club. Let's hit the movies. Let's do some of these things that you want to do, right? And so when you start to do this more and more, you start to develop the confidence you need to own your authentic truth in all situations. And you start to bring in the compassion and the mindfulness to be present to other people's needs and other people's desires so that you can be there for them in their experiences as well, right? So this also brings me back to the idea of like the 5 love languages. We all have ways that we want to be loved. We all have ways that we want to be appreciated. And just because the next person that we might be involved or engaged with may not be showing that love and those things in the way we want, doesn't mean that they may not still be showing love and appreciation. It just may be in the way that functions for them. And so when you have that mindfulness and you're able to start to pay attention to these things, you're able to start to resonate, okay, this is how I am. This is how I share and express love. But that's how they are, and that's how they share and express love. Then y'all can come together in the middle, and you can start to share and express love in the ways that you both would appreciate, without it being a slight to anybody. Without it being like, this is how I appreciate love. I appreciate love when I'm allowed to play video games and comic books, and then expecting to be able to play video games and comic books 24/7 whenever she's around. Shit's not gonna work out right. You gotta be willing to, okay, this is what I do to feed me. Or maybe she gives you a video game for Christmas or something. That's how she shares that love, because she understands that's what you're into. She's not gonna know that until you're willing to share that side of yourself. At the same time, you got to be willing to come out of that and meet her halfway at times, so that you can say, well, I know you enjoy these type of experiences, so maybe I'll meet you halfway, and I'm gonna save up, I'm gonna take you out to a nice dinner, or I'm gonna do something else along those lines. And there's a back and forth when it comes to this co-creative experience. But before you even get to that place of co-creative experience, you always want to start off with the truth of being yourself. Because any co-creative experience you creating where you're not allowed to be your true self, that co-creative experience is always going to fall apart, because it's based on bullshit. So this is just a little snippet, a little example of what it means to really be yourself, to embrace that, and to share that with another in confidence, with courage and mindfulness, to balance it out so that you can still be present and aware of the needs of the other, and not just absorbed in your own awareness of self. All right? So when you're working on being yourself, the confidence, the courage, admit your truth, share with others that which you are when you're alone, allow others to see that in public, and then bring in that mindfulness so that you can see them in their truth, and everybody can maintain that respect of the boundaries and the needs, and offer the love and the compassion, consideration each person needs from one another.